So this is the story of the Marquis de Carabas. And you may be wondering, what's that? Well, it's actually Puss in Boots, but the original name is Marquis de Carabas. And I'm going to be reading this in a second. And then stay tuned for later in the video because I'm going to be talking about some lessons to be learned from this. But I love this story. I want to really go in deep depth into it and then talk about how it applies to the much more broad topic of life. Once upon a time, a miller had died, leaving his 3 sons an inheritance. The eldest son received the mill, the second got a donkey, and the youngest, to his disappointment, was left nothing but a cat. He sighed, thinking, "What good is a cat to me? I might as well make a pair of gloves from its fur." But to his surprise, the cat spoke. "Don't be upset, master. Give me a pair of boots and a snack, and I will make you rich." The miller's son was astonished, but decided to trust the clever cat. He found a pair of boots for the cat and a sack as well. The cat put on the boots, slung the sack over his shoulder, and set off for adventure. In the forest, Puss in Boots laid out some corn in his sack and hid, waiting patiently. Soon some partridges came along, hopping into the sack to eat the corn. Quickly the cat pulled the strings of the sack tight, trapping the birds. He then made his way to the royal palace. At the palace, Puss in Boots bowed before the king and said, "My master, the Marquis de Carabas, sends you a gift of partridges." The king was very pleased with this offering and ordered that the cat be rewarded with gold. Over the next few days, Puss in Boots continued to bring gifts to the king, each time saying that they were from his master, the Marquis de Carabas, though no such person existed. The king grew more and more impressed. One day, Puss in Boots learned that the king and his daughter, the princess, were taking a ride along the river. The cat hurried back to his master and told him, "Master, follow my plans if you wish to become wealthy. Go to the river, take off your clothes, and jump in." Though puzzled, the miller's son did what the cat instructed. As soon as the king's carriage approached, Puss in Boots began to shout, "Help! My master, the Marquis de Carabas, is drowning." The king stopped the carriage, and upon hearing that the poor man in the river was the same Marquis de Carabas who had sent him so many gifts, he immediately sent his servant to rescue him. The cat explained that the thieves had stolen his master's clothes. So the king offered the miller's son some fine garments to wear. Now dressed as a nobleman, the miller's son appeared quite handsome. The king's daughter, the princess, immediately took a liking to him. As they traveled together, Puss in Boots ran ahead of the carriage and told the farmers they passed, "When the king asks who owns the land, tell him they belong to the Marquis de Carabas, or you'll be punished." The farmers, fearing the cat's threats, obeyed. Each time the king asked who owns the fields and the forests, he was told they belonged to the Marquis de Carabas, and the king was very impressed, and thought that the young man must be extremely wealthy. Eventually they reached a grand castle that belonged to a powerful ogre. Puss in Boots, being as clever as ever, went to see the ogre. He flattered the ogre and said, "I've heard you can transform into any animal, even something as large as an elephant." The ogre, proud of his powers, transformed into a massive elephant. "That's amazing," Puss in Boots said. "But surely you can't transform into something as small as a mouse." Eager to show off, the ogre immediately turned into a tiny mouse. Quick as a flash, Puss in Boots pounced and ate the mouse, ridding the castle of the ogre. The king arrived at the castle. Puss in Boots welcomed him, saying, "Welcome to the castle of the Marquis de Carabas." The king, amazed at the wealth and splendor of the estate, happily offered his daughter's hand in marriage to the miller's son. The miller's son, not known as the Marquis de Carabas, the miller's son, now known as the Marquis de Carabas, married the princess, and they lived happily ever after. And Puss in Boots, he became a great lord and lived in luxury for the rest of his days, never having to catch mice again unless he wanted to for fun. The story of Puss in Boots is indeed a powerful metaphor for the idea that you can become whatever you want to be if you're willing to step into the role and embrace it fully, much like method actors immerse themselves in a new identity. At the start, the miller's son feels trapped by his circumstances. He's been given a meager inheritance and sees himself as having no prospects. His life seems set, and his identity is that of a poor, powerless young man. But when Puss in Boots steps in, the cat encourages his master to take on the persona of the Marquis de Carabas, a wealthy nobleman. There's no external validation of his identity, no riches, no title, but Puss in Boots creates an opportunity through cleverness and confidence. The miller's son becomes a Marquis, but not because of any intrinsic change in who he is, but because he dares to step into the role. He jumps into the river, literally shedding his old clothes and symbolically his old identity, and emerges as someone new. His wealth and nobility are created through perception. The more he acts the part, the more others accept him as the Marquis of Carabas. The more real that identity becomes. The king, the princess, and all the peasants who work the land come to believe in the version of him that Puss in Boots presents, and soon that version becomes his reality. The story is very much aligned with the idea that identity is fluid, something that we can shift by shifting our minds and the way we present ourselves. It's about how self-perception and confidence can shape external realities, like a method actor who takes on a new role so fully that he becomes a part of them. The miller's son gradually inhabits the persona of the Marquis de Carabas so much so that by the end of the story he effectively becomes the role he is playing. The story implies that society responds to the identities we choose to project, and that external success often follows when we commit to a role with conviction. Puss in Boots acts like a nobleman's servant, so he is treated as such. The miller's son acts like a Marquis, so he is recognized as such. It is a tale that suggests the power of reinvention and transformation, showing that if you jump into a new role with enough belief in yourself, others will eventually see you the way you want to be seen. The idea of shifting identities and self-invention aligns with how people can evolve and redefine themselves, suggesting that who we are is, at least in part, something we choose and act out. It's not just a story about cleverness, it's about the profound power of self-perception and belief in both yourself and in the eyes of others. So that was a summary that I wrote up with the help of ChatGPT, but this story really reminds me of 48 Laws of Power and some of the roles that he talks about. And I'll go more in depth in this when my brain is functioning because it's kind of late at night. But it's kind of like, I don't know, frame control. If you have any preconception of what that is. And it's kind of like defining what reality is from the way you're seeing it, because there's many different ways to interpret a series of events. And if you are extremely confident in the way that you're interpreting them, then others will start to interpret those events the same way you are. So in 48 Laws of Power, so there was the Russian king, and if you stole the king's carriage without his permission, it was a sentence of death upon you. And one of his lesser workmen borrowed his carriage to go see his ailing mother. And the king first heard about this story. He's like, oh, how brave and how honorable is this man for risking his own life to go see his ailing mother. And that's how the king framed that situation in his mind. But the people who were jealous of this young man for the favoritism the king showed him, told the king, no, that's not what happened. This man stole the carriage to spite you. He did this to show that you're not powerful and to try to chip away slowly at your rules. And through having these people constantly reframing that person's actions to him, the king eventually came to have that man killed. So it's kind of like the idea of frame control, where you can do certain actions, and as long as you never back down from how you perceive them, then people eventually accept you into that role. I mean, what is the role that most of us play? How do we get there? I mean, if you just stood in the middle of the street all day and directed traffic and someone came and was like, hey man, you can't do that. You're like, that's cool. And then you just kept directing traffic. I mean, eventually people would just be like, okay, well, this dude directs traffic now. You can just do this stuff. If you're starting a company, people are going to be like, no, well, your company isn't going to start. It's going to fail. You need to do something else. And you just keep working it. Like, nope, it's going to be a success. Nope, it's going to be a success. And by just sticking with telling everyone that it's going to be a success and keeping on working on it, you'll eventually make it a success. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because you believed in it so much and you stuck with following it that it eventually came true. And I believe that's what this story kind of hits upon, and one of the things I like about it, because it tells you how you can redefine yourself, and it gives an example of it. And you can do this. Like, you can just redefine yourself in new roles. I know of stories of people that have moved to different cities and completely reinvented who they are. And granted, they're as much fleeing towards a vision of the future as from the past they found themselves stuck in. But the idea of reinvention is very much applicable. And this idea that we kind of have to like work our way up in steps, no, like you don't actually have to do that. You can define yourself for that role. There's a great book called Winning Through Intimidation, which used to be called How to Not Get Intimidated, but the author found that the new title sold more books, so he changed it back. But it's basically about the real estate game, and it comes from this guy who's a realtor and sells like multi-million-dollar projects. And he has this role, and he defines it as the leapfrog theory. And he says that you embody... Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to find it because he says it really well. Okay, here we go. The leapfrog theory from Robert Ringer's book, Winning Through Intimidation, is a concept about success and how people can achieve it faster than expected by leapfrogging over the traditional step-by-step progressions that most people believe is required to success. Ringer argues that many people are conditioned to think that success comes in a gradual, linear way, like climbing a ladder, one rung at a time. The leapfrog theory, however, challenges this mindset, asserting that it is possible to jump ahead of others who are slowly making their way up the ladder. Success doesn't have to be linear. It highlights the importance of mindset and the belief in your ability to leapfrog over those ahead of you, people who might have more experience or who have been working in the field longer. Much like the idea in Puss in Boots, the leapfrog theory emphasizes that your belief in yourself and your ability to present yourself confidently plays a critical role in how others perceive you. If you think and act like a successful person, you can leapfrog over those who may be more qualified but lack the sense of boldness and assurance. The theory encourages people to identify and seize opportunities that allow them to bypass the usual obstacles. It's about working smarter, not harder, and recognizing when the time is right to make a bold move. So it's just like declaring yourself to be the best and then acting that way, and then people start treating you. Like, you have to be able to back it up with the confidence and with the work. But if you know you can operate at a much higher stage than what you're currently operating at, you can just leapfrog there and declare yourself to be it and start operating like that person. So you decide, I'm not going to just spend the next 10 years trying to work my way there. I'm just going to clear myself there and then be there and then perform as there. And I like that mindset so much. I mean, hell, I got a job that I was highly unqualified for, doing software engineering and coding for the Spot robotic dog. Like, literally, I took an intro to Python course and then just talked about how good I was at coding at the interview. And they're like, oh my god, yeah, so you should know how to do this, all this stuff. I'm like, yep, I can do it. They give me the dog, and I'm just like, I'm watching YouTube videos, I'm reading PDFs online, and I'm studying my butt off, and I'm figuring out how to make this thing work. I mean, I taught myself computer vision and how to, like... I made a robotic arm. I'm going to put a video up over here. I made a robotic arm interface with a camera in order to give it vision and pick up stuff. Like, I taught myself how to do this. My boss once came to me. He's like, so I have this idea for a project. And I'm like, I forget what the project was, but I'm like, yeah, I can do that. It's like, how? I'm like, well, I'm going to start by watching a bunch of YouTube videos. And he just broke out laughing. He's like, I love how you never say no. I'm like, yeah, because I can do whatever it is you need. Like, I can teach myself whatever this job requires. And having that mindset is like I don't know, companies love it. Like, I have my own company, I love it. But like, I don't know, the belief that you can teach yourself to do whatever task needs to get done. The Marquis de Carabas. Peace out.